Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah, welcome to yet another Facebook live session with scholars of South Ilahi. Tonight, we have our another real conversations on the topic Ramadan and beyond, the path to freedom. And our guest for today is none other than Shaykh Ebrahim Schuitema. Assalamualaikum, Shaykh.
Wa alaikum salam, Abu Sufyan. Nice to see you again.
Alhamdulillah, nice to see you again, Shaykh. I hope you're well, Shaykh.
All very good. Thank you very much. Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. All right. Before we begin, Shaykh, I'll just recite your bio for a while, yeah? Bismillah. All right. Shaykh Ebrahim Schuitema is the founder and leading partner of Schuitema Associates, a business and personal transformation consultancy based in South Africa and a franchise in Pakistan. He is a murid of Sheikh Mustafa Bashir from Morocco of the Tariqah Shazli, and he now continues the spiritual work from his Sheikh. Alhamdulillah, Sheikh. Shaykh Ebrahim, I think it's very nice to catch up with you again after some time.
It's always a pleasure speaking to you, Abu Sufyan.
Alhamdulillah. I think the last time now when we spoke, it was very, very interesting. We spoke about, about growth, right? Tonight's topic is, I guess it's somewhat related, but it's also very interesting to have this conversation with you about Ramadan and beyond, the path to freedom. So I guess in order to scope it well, let's start with a bit more generic before we scope it in. So I wanted to ask you, now that we finished the month of Ramadan, in that sense, we're entering the month of Shawwal, we are in the month of Shawwal. How would a person that has progressed in a way from Ramadan to this month Shawwal and beyond, how should they move ahead? What are some of your general advice in this sense?
Well, I mean, I'd like to just prefix this that what is the advice I'd give myself? The temptation is we're out of Ramadan for the intensity of one's ibadah and your inner work to decrease. And from one point of view, that's entirely understandable because it's not so, you're not, your day is not so richly charged. You've got, you're not fasting, you're not getting up for suhoor, you're not eating at suhoor, and so on. So it is a different mindset. But I mean, what I understand the purpose of the deen to be. I mean, if you have if you think about, sort of the very big picture kind of definitions of what of the usefulness of deen. I think there's, I've spoken about this before. There's deen as identity and deen as a technology for transformation. And I think on this path, we have a tendency, should have a tendency to the latter. And if you're seeing the deen as a technology for transformation, then the first thing it does is it sacralizes your life. And that means it turns your entire life into something sacred. It's your intent is to turn your life into something sacred. Ramadan elevates that experience. You're far more conscious. You're doing the tarawih, you're doing this, you're doing that. So you're far more conscious. And the question is, how can you sacralize your life outside of Ramadan? In my experience, is to whatever you do, to do it with the deliberateness of soul. So, I mean, I don't know if you've noticed that you've had this experience, but you're really deliberate about eating in the fast. I mean, like in the first couple of days, you're not quite into the rhythm yet. You might find your hand straying unconsciously to that biscuit, and then you have to remind, whoa, I'm fasting. Or that, isn't that glass of water interesting? Whoa, I'm fasting. So there's like a deliberateness about how you engage your food. And it's that deliberateness of how you engage stuff that actually sacralizes the thing. It's no longer, you've elevated the thing from being the mundane and the ordinary to being the sacred, by being very deliberate about how you handle it. So if you want to take what Ramadan has for you into your life beyond Ramadan, then the first thing is sacralize your life. Try and do as much of it as you can deliberately. What I mean by deliberate, giving full attention to what you're doing in the spirit of making it not mundane, making it worthy of attention, sacralizing it. So there's, these habits that we go, I mean, the problem is that they become unconscious, like, saying Bismillah when you eat or when you leave something, or just, this is eventually one gets to the point where you're just saying it. But the reason why you're doing these things is that you're deliberate about it. You consciously dedicate the next moment. You say Bismillah, then you consciously dedicate the next moment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what you're doing by saying Bismillah. It's not a muttering that should be in the mouth. It should be something that sits in the intent, a deliberateness that sits in the intent. So that would be my first sort of rule of thumb kind of response to what you're saying. And clearly, it's a really tall order. So the first person who should be the recipient of this advice is me. I mean, this is called jihad for a good reason. I mean, this is the greater jihad. This kind of deliberateness, this watchfulness in every moment that you're in.
Subhanallah. Yeah, it's very interesting you mentioned about sacralizing each moment, because sometimes we tend to just go through the motion. We don't really be conscious about it. And like what you mentioned, you gave an example. You said saying like Bismillah before you begin something and being aware of what that means. I think that's a very interesting point, Shaykh, you made. Shaykh, based on this point, I wanted to link it to what you mentioned in your book, Millennium Discourses, and some of your other work, about the idea of, we talk about Ramadan, about restraining our sight, restraining us from eating, the words that we say. In your book, you mentioned about the idea of looking and seeing. Sorry, the idea of look, your sight and also your hearing, and how there is a difference between the two. If somebody were to give you a look, you'll be like, what are you looking at? But however, to be listened to is something that's a bit more, where a person is more receptive to who you are. Could you elaborate on, this idea of hearing and seeing in the whole, moving beyond, the month of just restraining ourselves in Ramadan? Yeah, because I thought that was quite interesting.
So, I mean, it's interesting that you intuitively felt that, hold on, looking and seeing there's an issue here. You noticed when you stumbled a bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And it's because this issue it's from one point of view, it's such an obvious issue. It's like the nose on your face. But the problem with the nose of your face, you don't see it because it's on your face. You know what I mean? So it's a distinction as obvious and as subtle and as kind of imperceptible initially. So the distinction is just this. I mean, the broad descriptions we have of the two kinds of use of your attention, it's basically a use of your attention, as we call it, the difference between predatory and receptive attention. And predatory attention is consistent with trying to get stuff. So that would be if you described somebody else's behavior towards you and you were to say, but this person is looking at me. I mean, very often that's felt as being sort of invasive. What do you want? Because you have a completely different experience if you describe the person's behavior as he's listening to me. Because when he's listening to me, he's allowing me into him. When he's looking at me, he is penetrating into me. Yeah, and very often, particularly fitrik people are very sensitive to this. I mean, I once had a really unnerving confrontation with a Berber woman, a very old Berber woman who pointed at my eyes and pointed down. They're saying, lower your gaze. It's like, I was a buffoon at the time. I was just walking around looking at everybody, and I think I was lucky this old woman didn't assault me. because a lot of people find it really offensive, really invasive, this sort of direct eye contact, looking at. Now, predatory attention is consistent with the intent to get. That's what a predator does. A predator zones in. I mean, technically, what your eyes do when you're looking is that you're using binocular vision. And the point about binocular vision is that it produces depth perception, and depth perception allows you to plan into the future, which is what a predator does. You know, it kind of works out where's the prey with regard to me, and what do I need to do to get to the prey. So all conditional motive, all motive that is concerned with producing outcomes is really a manifestation of predatory attention. It's about getting what you want from the world. And the problem is when you use your attention in a predatory way, you are fundamentally experienced as dangerous, which is why when somebody looks at you, you feel that as like somewhat threatening.
Yes.
But we have a different way of using our attention, which is to use our attention in a way that you could call receptive, which is like when the person's listening to you, you know, because when he's listening to you, he's allowing you into him. So his attention is not trying to get something, it's receiving you. It's allowing you, he's not going into you, he's allowing you into him. So we have these two different ways of using our receptive attention, our attention. The one is predatory and the other is receptive. Predatory attention is concerned with what you want to get, and receptive attention is concerned with what Allah is giving to you, what is coming towards you. And we know as the fundamental rule of thumb that what he has for you is far better, far greater for you than what you want to get. Which means if you cultivate the second use of your attention, receptive attention, then you create the conditions where you allow the vast blessing, which you aren't seeing right now because your attention's so focused. That's another thing that's connected with predatory attention, focus. So focus about the singular thing you're looking at. That you're not allowed, this cornucopia of blessing is just passing you by because you're not, you know, I mean, the mouth has to be open for the water to go in, but if it's closed, if your attention is closed like a mouth, then that blessing cannot go in, that it cannot be received.
Yes.
So you can only receive what your Rabb has in store for you, the degree to which, so it's an incremental thing, it's the degree to which your attention functions in a receptive way, is the degree to which the cornucopia, which is the blessing of your life, comes towards you. Now, it's very interesting that you stumbled over the word seeing.
Yes.
Because if you thought about it, is seeing predatory or receptive?
I would say it's a bit more receptive than
it's receptive.
Looking. Yeah.
It's looking. Do you understand? So this is an interesting thing. This is saying this is actually not fundamentally got to do with what sense organs you're using. It's how you're using that sense. There are two modalities of using any sense perception. The one is predatory and the second is receptive. And you can use any of your senses in either way. It's just your eyes are, so some of our senses are more geared towards predation. And our eyes are the most geared towards predation. But, you know, because literally we do have eyes like predators. We don't have, you know, deer's eyes are on the side of its head so that it can see what's coming towards it. But a lion's eyes are in front of it, like ours, so that we can do this depth. So our perception is fundamentally, our visual perception is fundamentally predatory, structured in a predatory way, whereas all our other senses are structured in a receptive way. But you can use your eyes in a receptive way by seeing rather than looking. Because clearly you can see more than what you're looking for.
Sure. I think that's very interesting because recently I had a conversation with someone and they were saying that, you know, they have a certain goal they want to achieve in their life, you know, but we discussed and we realized that, you know, sometimes we have to take a step back and see what Allah is putting in your life, what Allah is giving, which is what you're mentioning, rather than what you exactly want to pursue. But why is it that we become so, quote unquote, obsessed with the pursuit of this, what we're looking at, versus being receptive, what Allah is giving to us?
Well, He's made us that way. I mean, He's made us, you see, how can you discover that what he's given for you is better than what you wanted for yourself if you didn't want something for yourself in the first place? So our error is part of the journey. So it's in a sense not at all appropriate to disapprove of predatory attention and of people who behave in predatory ways, because they are on a journey. You know, because it's actually a journey of maturation. The more mature you are as a soul, the more receptive your attention will be. And it's an incremental journey. You know, less frequently you operate in a predatory way and more frequently you operate in a receptive way. And each one of those incremental shifts of deciding to use your attention in a more receptive than a predatory way is actually based on a failure. I mean, it's precisely that we strive at our projects and we are brought to our knees in failure that opens our attention to seeing what he has in store for us. So it's our failure is part of the journey and our weakness is part of the journey. Our weakness is by his design. He said he made us weak. This is the design. This is not a mistake.
Mashallah, Shaykh, it's as if you read my mind and heart, because that's what I have in mind. Well, my next question, which is the idea of submission. Which is the idea of submission, because our topic today is about the path to freedom, right? But we have this. There's this almost like a dichotomy. I wouldn't say dichotomy. The Sufis would say that true freedom is submission to God, right? To be a slave. Right. And you mentioned about when life pushes you on your knees, which is exactly what I wanted to ask you about, leading into this question, which is, what could you elaborate? What do the Sufis mean when they mention that, you know, freedom, real freedom in worship, in life, is submission to God?
Okay. So you can reduce your engagement with life to so there are two parallel problems or issues, not problems, two parallel ways of describing being alive, Sufyan. The one is to look at the whole issue through the lens of intention, and the second is to look at it through the lens of attention. The discussion we had a moment before was really looking at the issue through the lens of attention. These are parallel issues, and there's a whole discourse around, you know, how they differ, but fundamentally they actually are looking at the same problem. And they are deeply connected. So, because, you know, how can I put it? Your intention will drive your attention. They can, you know, what's important to you is where you'll place your attention. So if you look at the issue of intent, then the intent has a fundamental architecture. There's two root possibilities of how you could construct your intent. You can either construct your intent on the basis of what you want from the other, from life, from other people.
Yes.
The second is to construct your intent on the basis of what life, and read for that the totality of the other, therefore read for that Allah, what Allah wants from you. So you can either engage the moment on the basis of what you want to get from other than you, to what you should give to Allah. What you want to get from Allah, what you can give to Allah. Every moment has those two variables kind of associated with it. Now, when you want something from other than you, so I want your glasses. Actually, they're very nice glasses. Mine are cheapies. I want your glasses. Very nice. If I want your glasses, clearly your ability to withhold your glasses from me gives you power over me. So if you want something, and it doesn't matter what it is, whether it's good opinion, whether it's wealth, whether whatever, when you want something from somebody else or something else, that thing's ability to withhold what you want gives that thing power over you. It therefore defines your state. And you're a prisoner. You're a prisoner on the basis of your expectations. You're a prisoner on the basis of your desires. You're the prisoner on the basis of anything you want from something, for anything that you want from the world, because whatever you want gives other than you power over you.
Inshallah.
So then you're a slave. Then you're a true slave. Right. Then you are not free. You're a bondsman. You know, but a bondsman in the sense of under the thumb, oppressed. When I shift my intent, I deliberately say, I'm not going to deal with you on the basis of what I want from you. I'm not going to deal with the world, which is Allah's face, on the basis of what I want from it. I'm going to deal with it on the basis of what He wants from me. And we translate that into the instance that I have my interaction with you. So I forego, I let go of my desire for your glasses. Despite the fact that they're so damn nice and I really want it. I forego my desire for your glasses. And I shift my attention and my intention to how I can be helpful to you. The moment I do that, you can no longer withhold the glasses, which means I slip out from underneath your ability to manipulate and dominate me, and I become free from you. So there's a deep paradox in this thing. When I turn myself into Allah's slave, I am as free as a bird. When I turn myself into the one who in every moment acts on the basis of what He wants from me, nobody has me by the throat. I'm under nobody's thumb. But the moment I deal with the world on the basis of what I want from it, I am everybody's slave.
Inshallah.
So actually our path is not a path, it is a path of deliberately acting consistently with being the dutiful slave, acting on the basis of what your Rabb wants from you, but it's actually the path of indescribable, absolute freedom. I mean, the most fundamental thing that you could want is to stay alive. And if you say, in any situation that I'm in, I practice the skill of giving up unconditionally, handing over unconditionally. And the supreme moment that tests that is death. And I learn the capacity to hand over unconditionally in every moment that I'm in. It means that when death comes to visit me, I can die eloquently, with a sense of freedom. In fact, with a sense of style. I think people can die with panache. Why not? I can let it all go. Fantastic. Now, somebody who's like, tell me, whose slave is that? I mean, how can you dominate a person? A person who can let it all go, kind of like, it's like with a lightheartedness. Like, this person is the freest being on the planet. So actually, our path is the path of freedom. It is the path of absolute radical freedom.
Inshallah. That's very beautiful, Shaykh. You remind me of what you mentioned previously about dying before you die. To die before you die. Yeah, and that's very beautiful. I wanted to try to link to something else that you mentioned in your works and also our past conversation. You said in one of your books, Millennium Discourse, you said that you are the pinnacle of creation that has been created. And you said that that the greatest thing that we can do is actually to be astonished at the creator, right? And Rumi also has this line. He mentioned, sell cleverness and buy bewilderment, which is like, instead of trying to be smart, try to be at awe with God. Could you try to elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by the idea of being astonished? Why is this so important to be at awe with what you see? Why is this so important in this path of freedom?
So if one spend some time considering who you really are, and when I mean who you really are, not all the incidental, not the persona stuff. I'm Muslim, I have this name. Strip all of that away. Who am I? I'm first of all, I'm this kind of strange, wakeful thing that's caught in a bag of skin that does all sorts of unnerving things, like sweats, and I won't go into further detail, but you know what I mean. I mean, this is like, so it's like so there's this wakefulness, there's this looker perched on top of this carcass, And I mean, the human being is stuck with a terrible problem. We really need to know why. I don't think my cats ever consider that problem. I watch them quite intently. I don't think they ever have this problem. They don't look back and say, what the hell is all of this about? Why am I here? What is this? What is this? This light that's shining out of, why is it here? So we human beings ask that question of ourselves, and we actually spent a lot of time evading the, it's like a haunting question, but most of us anesthetize that investigation by pursuing all sorts of other things. We think that this nagging wonder, doubt, I don't mean wonder as an amazement, like curiosity, that we anesthetize it by pursuing wealth or women or cars or whatever.
Yes.
So what is this way? So if I say, well, what am I really? Well, the thing is, this thing is very peculiar because it looks out at this, the small thing, looking out at all of that. And if I want to get a sense of who I am against, or who this looker is against all of that, then maybe we should take ourselves to a place that's not like Singapore, because you're lots of buildings and kind of maybe take it to the desert, okay, on a mountain somewhere or in the Himalayas. So you get a real sense of perspective. Because when you see things as they are, when you get a sense of perspective and you recognize how small you are and how vast that is, there's one of two experiences. The one is absolute astonishment. Amazing. It's called awe. The second is terror, and there isn't a third. Because the logical reaction, the same reaction of that which is very small in the face of that which is overwhelming is terror of being overwhelmed. Yeah. So we've got these two ways of experiencing the essence of our being alive, terror or awe. Yeah. Now, that awe, what makes the difference between the two possible is gratitude. If I recognize that, hold on, that vast thing that I'm looking at, that astonishing, majestic thing, first of all, is not my enemy. Because if it was, it would have overwhelmed me. I mean, if everything that wasn't you had you in its sight, you wouldn't be able to stay alive for another moment. You would die. You know, I mean, if the logical possibility is that I could be overwhelmed, that I'm not overwhelmed, it has to mean that which is overwhelming is being withheld from me. So there's a blessing of being withheld, of something withheld, but then there's also a blessing of stuff granted. There's nothing that I made up of, that this carcass, this bag of skin is made of, that hasn't come from other than me. There's not a single thing in this that I've manufactured myself. I mean, I can take stuff, I can't put stuff in, I take stuff away, I can, shave, whatever. I mean, but I haven't made this. So I have been granted by that, and I have that withheld from me so that I can see that. In other words, the vastness that I'm looking at, which is his face, is my benefactor and my ally. And I've been made, the structure of my consciousness is such, I've been made to have this experience of amazement. And part of the magic of the amazement is the insight of my in-self-sufficiency, and also that what isn't me is fundamentally driven by an intelligence which is benign, vastly benign towards me. Then I see the thing as it is. When I don't see the thing as it is, and I recognize this thing as vast, I'm telling myself the world is a dangerous place. And so, well, then my project becomes surviving. How do I keep that which is vast and overwhelming from overwhelming me? Then I don't assume that I'm protected by that the vastness, the danger is withheld from me, and I don't assume that I'm provided for. So then I have to work very hard at those two things, provision and protection.
Yes.
And working very hard at those two things, at provision and protection, is really then a way of anesthetizing the problem of the terror.
Yeah.
on this path, we say, well, that's a waste of time. Why did you just come to terms with the terror in the first place? Just, forego the project. I mean, just because then you will see that there's no way you can do better for you than what all of that has done for you already. There's no way you can protect yourself if Allah isn't going to protect you. I mean, I love this line. That you can be taken out by anything from a microbe to a meteor. So how the hell do you think you're going to, by your own ingenuity, stay alive? How are you going to protect yourself? How deep must the walls be to keep the Grim Reaper away? It's not possible. So it's I mean, I don't know how I got here, obviously, but I did start off with a desire to answer you sensibly.
The idea of awe. It's interesting because, I have a few things in mind I wanted to ask you. And it's really related, actually, because you mentioned about awe, right? And you mentioned about terror. So you can either be in a state of terror or in a state of awe, which is in line with what I wanted to ask you. And the question is, how do we engage with Allah, or how do we become a person that has courage instead of you behaving with cowardice? Instead of being a coward, how do you become someone who has courage? Because you mentioned, all these things can make you afraid. The past can make you afraid. What you went through can make you in fear. But in our worship, in our dealings with people, even, how do we operate on a sense that we become more courageous, right? So you're moving forward in that sense. How do we do that, Shaykh?
Well, so the issue is, we need to translate that slightly, the question, because the issue is, how do I know that he is my benefactor, remember, the one who gives to me,
yes,
and my ally, the one who protects me?
Mm-hmm.
Well, in every situation, I act on the basis not of what I want to get, but on what I can give. What I can give isn't necessarily always courageous, you see.
Mm.
So giving presents itself to you in two broad categories. There's generosity and courage. Generosity is concerned with putting things associated with yourself on the line, is giving away things. Courage is associated with putting yourself on the line. They are both important, and they both have their sense of appropriacy. So if a hungry child asks you for food, the appropriate thing to do is to give the child food. If you're walking through a park in your neighborhood and a thug is busy beating up a little old lady, then the appropriate thing to do is to beat up the thug. As I know you would, Abu Sufyan, you beat up the thug. and then if you looked at these two bits of behavior from a purely behavioral point of view, you'll be a bit surprised. You say, but listen, I mean, are both of these giving? Yes, they are. But the giving is behaviorally almost contradictory, because when you were giving food to the child, you were kind and sweet. When you were confronting the thug, you were being brutal. That's exactly the point. Giving isn't about being nice, it's about being appropriate. Sometimes it's about kindness, sometimes it's about brutality. So you learn to forego your own interests so that you can allow the bigger thing to come to you in small increments. And the price isn't always the same. And one of the trick that we've learned is to invert the matter and confuse ourselves. So in a sense, the easiest way to explain this is, if being appropriate, if giving means that you are acting consistently with either the generosity or the courage that's operative in the situation that you're in, then taking has to mean getting your logic wrong. So if there's a knock at the door, and you open the door and there's a child asking you for food, and you slap the child, and we're shocked. So obviously, why'd you slap the child? And you say, no, I'm being courageous. That's not courage, Sophia. That's called selfishness. And if you're walking through the park and the little old lady's been beaten by the thug, and you ran over and you grab the bag, which is what the thug really wants, and you give it to the thug. And we're shocked. We say, why are you doing this? You said, no, I'm being generous. That's not generosity, that's cowardice. So actually, the situation that you're in requires generosity from you. And you act in a so-called courageous way. You're not giving, you're taking. We call that selfishness. And when it requires generosity, courage rather, then you act in a so-called generous way. You're not giving, you're taking, we call that cowardice. So it's more nuanced than just always being courageous. It's about committing to being appropriate. In fact, sometimes the appropriate thing to do is not to confront, it's to be kind. But it's still working with the two roots of being able, of exercising reliance on his provision and reliance on his protection. Ar-Rahman Rahim. Generosity is relying on his provision, and courage is relying on his protection. It's saying, I cannot provide for myself and I cannot protect myself.
MashaAllah. That's a very interesting distinction. I think a clarification that you made, Shaykh. I think, especially now more than ever, and then there's a lot of, fear, a lot of, how I put it, a lot of grief going on. Yeah. But perhaps linking to that, the idea of, because you mentioned about Allah's protection, about having courage and also generosity. How does one deal with issues like grief, like how, this kind of issues? How does this come into work to see Allah in such a situation?
Allah says, he says that we will, the reward of the believers is that they don't fear and they don't grieve. They don't have fear and they don't grieve. And grief is obviously concerned with the past. You have lost. It's a past tense. And fear is concerned with the future.
MashaAllah.
And I suppose the inverse of grief would be gratitude. And the inverse of fear would be belief or trust. And so what this suggests is that actually, by learning the little moments of foregoing, you exercise the muscle of loss. View it like a gymnasium, So, if you can't let go of forego, hand over the slice of bread to the child who's asking you for bread, how on earth do you propose to lose a loved one? Or, so actually generosity and the consistent acts of kindness to others should develop in us. And in my experience, it does develop in us the capacity not to, even the Rasul experienced grief, but it doesn't knock you over, and you're able to integrate it, because very quickly the blessing of what the person had brought to your life that you're grieving about far outweighs the loss, the pain. So it is about learning how to translate one's sense of resentment at what had been taken away to gratitude for what there had been. And doing that translation piece is actually is what that produces in us is a deep conviction that is at the root of the matter. The essence of the matter is nothing can be taken away. There's we will all be together again. You know, that any separation is temporary, and it's not absolute. We will all be together again. That's his promise. You know, there is a hereafter. There is you know, and in that sense, no loss, particularly loss of relationships, is irrevocable.
Inshallah. Thank you, Sheikh, for that. I think it's very interesting because, yeah, a lot of times, you know, we go through a lot of grief and, you know, sometimes self-hating and all this internal desires or issues that turmoil that people face. And you did mention about the jihad and jihad of the self being the highest jihad. So I guess, you know, that really helps us to clarify things, you know, to see it, find Allah in it, find gratitude in it. I guess I wanted to scope it into something else that I find quite interesting whenever we have these conversations with you, Sheikh, which is when we read your works and we speak to you, we find that there's a lot of wisdom in the things that you say. Moving on in the path in Ramadan and beyond, how do we inculcate a sense of deeper contemplation in our lives? Because we notice that, you know, you always have this very deep insights about things. Could you share with us how can we cultivate such a insight to life and seeing things, you know, with new fresh set of eyes, so to speak? Yeah.
So I mean, the journey for me has basically been committing to practice and committing to reflection. You know, so practice is the salah, but then also, you know, to very deliberately spend significant amounts of time getting as quiet as you can. You know, doing muraqabah, doing, you know, resting your attention on your breath, so that to give attention. You see, most of our attention is dedicated, because our attention is predatory, our attention is dedicated to what's in front of us. But the moment your attention becomes receptive, you almost pull deeper inside your own being, and you can start giving attention to where attention is coming from. It sounds a little bit strange, but to what's going on behind your eyes, you know. And really, that's the purpose of any inner work, including salah. It helps to gather, it helps to get you inwardly gathered, so you can do. So the first is commit to your practice. And don't commit to your practice in the spirit of being a good person. I mean, that's just not helpful. That's only a heartbeat away from committing to practice so that somebody can see you. You know, in fact, the purpose of practice isn't standing up, it's disappearing, it's going in, you know, being receptive. So that's the one is the committing to practice. And the second is reflect. And reflecting means try and work it out. I mean, what's going on? What is this mystery of being? It's such a strange thing, being alive. It really is bizarre. I mean, that to have feet and to come in, you know, even this is so peculiar, you know, and so I mean, to just examine it, because what is this? Don't take anything for granted. And I found one of the most profound ways of doing that is is do it in text. Journaling is very, very helpful. You know, reflect on your experiences, and so I mean, I believe that, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us all the experience. We don't need to read a single book. That's, you know, I had this problem in Singapore before I got myself into trouble, because you know, I was horrified that I was described as a scholar, because I don't experience myself as scholarly at all. And I really don't see this endeavor as a scholarly endeavor. It's not something about text. It's about really examining first-hand experience. No.
That's very interesting. Thank you so much, Sheikh, on that distinction. Because we spoke about a few interesting things. There's this dimension, or you mentioned the dimension of like space, like how when you're in a mountaintop, you know, you see everything as small, but when you're below, you know, so there's dimension of space. But I wanted to talk about the dimension of time, right? I wanted to talk about this dimension of how we can have, like, for example, the shuyukh, the awliya, they have a lot of barakah in their time. Right? They have a blessed time. Well, although their lives might have been same as ours, maybe 60 years, but they've accomplished a lot of things. They've done a lot of blessings. There's a lot of fadl, a lot of grace. How do we nurture that? How do we inculcate this in our lives? This dimension of time, you know, everyone's given 24 hours, but for the awliya, their 24 hours is not the same as our 24 hours. You know, so how do we nurture this? How do we get more of such a blessings in the time?
So we started off our conversation talking about the necessity to sacralize your life. A technical way of describing what you're doing is you're shifting your attention from outcome into process. You're not just doing things to get there, to get it done. You're doing things to do them well. So two men are walking up a mountain. The one is walking like an ordinary man, and the other is walking like a fakir, an aspirant. Initially we have no way of interrogating what's going on inside them. We just look at, there's a body of a person walking up a mountain. Person A is the ordinary man, he's walking up the mountain, and person B is also walking up them. They're both doing exactly the same activity. When Allah gives us this very peculiar tool called an attention and intention probe, so we go into the guy's ear and we see what's going on in his head, in his consciousness. We suddenly realize the first person is walking to get to the top of the hill. So the walking is the means and the end is the top of the hill. The second person is walking in order to walk well. But you can't walk well if it doesn't have a challenge. So you need a bit of a challenge. You need a top of the hill. But he uses the top of the hill as his means to walk well. So the first person's attention is an outcome. There's process, but the process is the means. The second person's attention is on process. The outcome is the means. From an intent point of view, the first person is there to take. The second person is there to give. Consistent with the shift of your intention from taking to giving is a shift of your attention from outcome into process. Now, the person whose attention is concerned with outcomes will experience their life as onerous. They'll experience constriction. I mean, so I'm doing this now in order to get there. You know, I'm pushing myself into the world. You know, and I obviously there's actually a kind of a meditation that we do sometimes at the Zawiya that demonstrates this. I mean, can I explain it to you?
Bismillah.
So at the bottom of our property here, there's a street called Fifth Road. It's basically it's a rural area, so it's a gravel road, but it's probably about 3 kilometers long. It's got gum trees on the whole length of the road, gum trees on either side, and then gum trees at the end of the road. So what you do the first time, when people go on the outward journey, you say to them, they're all standing together, you say to them, you see the gum trees at the bottom, there, at the bottom of Fifth Road. Walk to get there. That's the only instruction you give them. And they as they're walking, they're getting irritated, they almost, elbowing. It's very interesting to watch. And amazingly, when they get there, they're not happy, they're just disgruntled. There's not been a pleasant experience. Walk to get there. On the way back, you tell them, no. What I want you to do is, it's fine, focus on the trees at the end of the road, but don't give attention to what you're focusing on. Give attention to what's in your peripheral vision, because that's obviously the difference, focus and peripheral. Give attention to the trees as they slip past you as you walk. On the journey back, they've got a completely different experience. They experience a lot more. It's been a relaxed experience. If you time it, they've actually done it faster. On the outward journey, they get exhausted by the journey. It's because they are doing the work. They are taking themselves to the end of fifth row. On the way back, actually, they don't have this experience of pushing into the future. They have this experience of time slipping past them, or the tree slipping. In other words, it's like they're standing on a treadmill. You know what I mean? They're just twiddling their legs. They're not going into the world is coming to them. That is an experience of the difference between predatory and receptive attention. So what that says to you is that more than just consuming the world, predatory attention consumes the self. You get a life experience of constriction and of being used up. You've turned yourself into a resource, you know. Whereas the second person has an experience of being nourished by their life. There's this cornucopia that's coming towards them on an ongoing basis. They don't experience constriction, they experience expansion. The moment isn't tight, the moment is spacious. So that's, I think, is why one has the sense of you know, people who've had some experience on being on the path seem to achieve a lot, you know, but they don't really achieve a lot. It's just that life comes towards them. They don't work, life works.
MashaAllah. That's very interesting, Sheikh. Yeah, thank you so much for sharing on that. And it's very interesting because it's true that when you solely focus on that tree that you mentioned at the end of the road, you exhaust yourself. But if you focus more on the peripheral vision, you know, you try, quote unquote, you kind of like enjoy the journey, or you really appreciate the journey instead of just the destination. I wanted to, it's very interesting
May I just
conversation.
interrupt you there for a moment?
Yeah. Yes.
All endurance sports people know this.
Okay.
Anybody who does endurance sports, it doesn't matter what it is, cycling or running or whatever it is. If you're having a tough time, you're running a marathon and you're running to get there, you'll exhaust yourself. If you want to get there, one step at a time. Just take the next step, take the next step, just take the next step. That is shifting your attention from outcome into process, then the outcome comes to you. But when you pursue the outcome, it recedes from you. I mean, it stands to reason if the lion's in the field, the prey will run away. What do you expect? Because you're a scary piece of work. So all the outcomes that you want, when your attention's structured in a predatory way, actually flee you. They don't come towards you, they run away from you.
Yeah, Sheikh, I actually experienced that as well. I think there's a difference between running, let's say, there's this test that we have to do, 2.4 kilometers. You have to do it under a certain time, versus you run, let's say, a nice, relaxing 5 kilometers jog, and you're actually looking at the trees, you're actually being focused on your breath and contemplating. I think it's a vastly different experience in the two, you know. Yeah. So I totally agree with you, Sheikh, on that. Yeah. I find that very interesting. Sheikh, I wanted to speak about another idea that you also mentioned in your book, which is this idea of nobility. Right? Because towards the end of your book, The Millennium Discourses, you do mention about the human being and this idea of how we can become noble. And we have ennobled human beings, right? Bani Adam. So, and on this, would you say that being ennobled and the pursuit of this nobility is also a path to freedom, of knowing that yourself and knowing Allah?
Yes, I mean, it's another way. It's really synonymous for the whole idea of being on the path. You know, it's sort of it's what the what do you call it, the medieval alchemists sort of try to pursue. To win treasure literally win gold from lead, to transmute lead into gold, to ennoble the dense, the heavy, the demeaned, to create it, to turn it into something of immense value and noble. So that's what the path is. The path is the alchemy of the self. It turns that which is your current human condition, which is base, heavy, sort of crude, into something refined and ennobled and noble.
MashaAllah. The alchemy of the self, interesting, because recently we had a conversation on Facebook Live, and I recalled this book called The Alchemist. And that book, this boy was looking for a buried treasure, and he had a dream that the buried treasure was in a faraway land, or rather he thought that he had to go on this journey. So he pursued, he went on this journey, but in the end, towards the end, someone told him that the buried treasure is actually under this building, which was where he started in the first place.
Amazing.
And I felt it's really interesting because there's this relation of the journey, the outcome, and also the idea of the alchemy of the self, that the journey is actually processing of the self, not really you walking.
Yeah. But it's not going to happen if you don't walk.
Indeed. Yeah.
I mean, that's the conundrum. You see, you can't come back if you haven't left.
You can't come back if you haven't left.
No. So I don't think this path is for holy people.
MashaAllah.
This path is for people who've seriously messed it up. And realize, hold on.
Would you say it's like a redemption, Shaykh? Is that the right word to say?
It's exactly that. Yeah, we are beings in need of redemption. But I mean, obviously, we need to be lost first, otherwise, there's nothing to be redeemed.
Yeah. You mentioned.
So I think one of the attributes that one sort of needs to develop on this journey is a genuine compassion for the misguided and the lost and the confused and the broken. Because you have to understand that is the human story. They are there, but for the grace of God go I. That is my story. And that is indeed my story. I mean, it's not just metaphorically so. I might not have come out to quite the same extremity of misbehavior with that person, but I've done my own equivalent. So this is, you're not on this journey if you spend your time disapproving of and judging others.
Thank you, Sheikh. I mean, I guess that redemption is a big thing. Before we end, I think I'd just like to speak about one last
yes,
topic.
Certainly.
Before we ask for your closing dua, inshallah. I thought that this entire conversation is very interesting. We started with how you mentioned moving on from Ramadan is about sacralizing what you do, making the intention, Bismillah, to have Allah in what you do. This is a word that is frequently used, but commonly, I would say, very misunderstood. This idea of love, Sheikh. This sacred path of love, if we can call it that, right? Where does this sacred path of love come in this topic of the path to freedom, moving on from Ramadan, and we talk about redemption, love for people, love for God, what does it really mean to walk this sacred path of love?
Yeah, that's a challenging problem, obviously, because there's two ways that you can see the word. You can see the word as a verb, or you can see the word as a noun. Now, what stands in your hands is to see the word as a verb. Love is something you do. Love is something you do unconditionally. It is about being unconditionally at service of what Allah has put in front of you in every moment that you're in. Love is not a feeling, and it's not an experience. It is something you do. It is a verb. And there's a wonderful Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young song where these very clever Americans said, these dope smoking Americans, you know, if you can't be with the one you love, love the one you're with. Right. So do love. Not experience love, do love. That comes from you to the Rabb. Love is a verb. Love as a noun comes from the Rabb to you. And how does it come from the Rabb to you? It is because you start to have the blessing of experiences of an ecstatic feeling of not quite being confined by your own skin. That you feel connected with what is around you in ways that you can't really even capture in words. But it's a deeply satisfying and deeply pleasurable experience that if you say, well, what do I call this experience? Love is probably as good as you're going to get to it. But that experience is a gift. You don't do that. You do the verb piece. That thing is a gift that gets given to you, because what the verb piece does, you see, when you act unconditionally in the interest of other than you in every situation that you're in, the message you're giving yourself is you saying, my interests and the interests of the other are the same. When I act in your interest, I'm saying my interest and your interest are the same. I don't have to look after myself. Looking after you is actually the same as looking after myself. I transcend my experience of existing as a discrete and individual and separate being. Every time I sincerely serve the other in the situation that I'm in, I incrementally escape a little bit more of the cage of feeling like I'm this discrete being trapped inside this bag of skin. I have the sense that I'm connected with, I'm one with other than me. And that experience of connectedness and oneness, that you can call that love. But you don't make that experience. He grants you that experience because you did the serving piece. And also, there isn't, because that's why you see he's clever like this. He's not, he knows what he's dealing with. We're sneaky people. Because we then get to the point and say, well, I'll be nice, and then I will experience this. So it's a contract. You give me love, the noun, I'll do all this. I'll do this, you give me that. No. It's unconditional. Unconditional means you don't earn it. You can't pay the price for it, you see. So there's, it's like you won't have the experience if you haven't done the serving, but there's no one-on-one relationship between the serving and the experience.
Yeah, Shaykh, thank you for explaining to us about that. Alhamdulillah. May Allah bless you as always. I think it's always very nice to have a conversation with you.
And I enjoy talking to you too, Abu Sufyan. You ask such clever questions. But half the questions you ask me have to force me to think.
Alhamdulillah. I mean, it's always interesting to talk to you. And yeah, Shaykh, inshallah, we'll love to have you on the Facebook Live some more. It's
my pleasure.
Alhamdulillah.
Thank you.
Inshallah. Shaykh, would you like to give us inshallah a closing dua so that we can end?
May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect all of you, grant you the very best, both of this world and of the next. May grant you satisfaction of your sincere pursuit and nearness to him and annihilation in him. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد عبدك ورسولك نبينا وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم تسليما سبحان ربك رب العزة عما يصفون والسلام على المرسلين الحمد لله.
Alhamdulillah. Thank you so much. Allah bless you. Thank you. Grant you
You
good health.
too.
Take care. Assalamu alaikum, Shaykh. Inshallah, till next time.
Walaikum salam, and thank you
Take
for
care, Shaykh.
forgiving my lack of attention. Maybe for next time, just for
Astaghfirullah.
heaven's sake, send me a message or something in the morning. Just remind me. Because it's getting worse. I mean, I'm sometimes like a lost 3-year-old. Kind of. I get lost in my own day.
It's okay, Shaykh. Allah bless you. You're fana in it. You're annihilate in it. MashaAllah. Take care, Shaykh. Assalamualaikum.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Alhamdulillah. All right, Alhamdulillah, we've just come to the end of another very interesting and insightful conversation with the scholars of Saud Ilahi. That was real conversations, Ramadan and beyond, the path to freedom. And we hope that you've gleaned a lot of interesting insights that you can practice and also in your life, and also change the way we look at things, our perception, and may it be beneficial, inshallah. And inshallah, tomorrow we have another Facebook live sessions on the Sacred Path of Love book. We're having a very interesting conversation with Sid Khalid, Saida Ainun, and a few other volunteers. We hope that you can tune in. I believe that's happening at 8:30 p.m. tomorrow, inshallah. And we are still looking for contributions for the hospital. So do check in the link bit.ly/hospital2020. And please pray for us, our volunteers, our directors. May Allah bless you. May Allah forgive all of us. And thank you so much for your support. With that, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.